Welcome back to the channel. It's Monday. It's time for Worst of the Week, and I thought I would do something a little bit different. Recently, your boy Zach said Astonishing Iceman #2 was a change of form for Steve Orlando. It was actually worth reading, and I said, hey, perhaps he's onto something here. Every once in a while, Doc and I like to pull a switcheroo on you guys and actually have something that we can actually recommend. So it's Astonishing Iceman #2, Steve Orlando, Vincenzo Caruto with Doc. How you doing, buddy?
I love the guy. But dude, this comic was awful.
The first issue is orders of magnitude worse, in my opinion, but it's still not good. Although the art by Vincenzo Caruto is certainly the high point of it, but the story itself could use some TLC, a little bit of lovey-dovey from an actual editor or writer that knew how to write a superhero comic book.
I honestly, I don't even think that the art was all that great. I mean, was it better than the writing? Sure. It still wasn't good. I just did not like virtually anything about this comic.
Yeah, not a whole lot of exciting stuff going on there. So I do apologize. I thought Doc and I were going to come out here and be like, listen, haha, ta-da, Astonishing Iceman #2 is actually not bad. We're going to recommend it. That is not going to happen. Let's explain why, Doc. So we open up the story and we're getting a flashback to back in the day. Bobby is out on a date with his best gal and some bigots. I don't know if they're hitting on her or what they're doing. But he turns into Iceman. He uses his ice powers. He freezes this guy that ends up becoming the mayor of the city. And people storm his house and they're going to kill him. There's a mob there. And his dad, who they portrayed as a very bad man, even though he's no longer with us, actually goes out there and defends Bobby. Although Bobby is a crying mess, even though he basically froze him to death. And it wouldn't you know it, back in real time, because what Orcus has done, people are storming again and they're wanting to kill Bobby's mom to get to him. Things never change, Doc.
Bobby was 14 when he went to live permanently at the Xavier School. This Bobby is like 18, 17, 20, and still living at home, dating some girl, and also didn't realize he was a mutant. So from page 1, all those things that make Bobby Drake Iceman and unique, none of those things exist. First of all, we have terrible continuity. We have the most cliched bullshit. Guy sort of defends himself, and suddenly there's a lynch mob at his fucking house trying to kill him. Also, back then, when Bobby was 14, his dad did hate him, did consider him a monster, and threw him out of the house for being a mutant. That's why he went to Xavier School at 14, because his dad was an unrepentant bigot at that time. So we're just completely changing history at this point.
Well, perhaps you'll be a little bit more happy once we get to the relationship with Romeo. I guess this is the highlight. This is really what the comic book is about. They go back to the Fortress of Solitude. And the weird thing about this comic book, and the most creepy thing, is this isn't really Bobby. Bobby died. And then Romeo, who has empathic powers, recreated Bobby in his own image. So this is really just Romeo's sex doll or whatever. And of course, they got to be in the bed. They got to be canoodling. And Bobby now wants a commitment because he can feel himself falling apart when he's out there, at the molecular level, and Romeo can feel it too, because he's not really a human being. He's actually a construct of his own empathy, and he can feel all the things going on, but he's not willing to, put a ring on it. It's kind of weird.
The Astonishing Iceman is just Romeo, guy you didn't know existed 3 months ago. The comic with Iceman real doll involved. I mean, I guess it's slightly less creepy than Somnus. I feel like Steve Orlando might need his hard drive checked, because there seems to be a lot of very unconsensual things that seem to be a repeating theme of his creative characters, like his created characters. This is the second one that kind of just uses actual existing mutants as playthings. It's kind of weird.
It's not kind of weird. It's really fucking weird. It's like Weird Science, but without the jokes and being a comedy and thinking that it's like The Notebook.
When you're doing it seriously and you're not doing it as a bit, it gets really weird really quick, and there are no bits in here. There's something very, very wrong here. There's something very wrong with Somnus as a character.
There's something called the Sapien League. When I see the word sapien, I imagine it relates to humans, for Homo sapien or whatever. but they're not. This guy's made out of helium, and there's some other weird monsters that apparently Orcus hired, particularly Director Devo hired them, and they're trying to take over the city, and they got Iceman, Bobby Drake's mom, and they're trying to infiltrate the mayor of the city, who's very anti-mutant because Bobby froze this guy when he was a kid. Even though the helium guy says to Bobby Drake's mom, I'm about to murder you, and I'm going to kill you if your son doesn't come here so I can kill him. Bobby stops by. He tells some jokes to some local kids. He freezes some things by touching them in their pee-pee or whatever. And then he goes and has a chat with the mayor all the while. I think his mom is supposed to be on the brink of death because of this helium guy from the Sapien League that doesn't make any sense because none of them are human. They're just elements or something.
I feel like I kind of understood what Steve Orlando was going for here. The Sapien League thing was a false flag operation. Orcus actually hired them, but they claimed they were hired by the Sapien League because the Sapien League is basically a bunch of Friends of Humanity, neo-Nazi level anti-mutant bigots that are...
Why would they hire more mutants to fight mutants?
Because they're not mutants, they're robots.
The helium guy's not a robot?
Apparently he is. I don't understand how he's a robot, because apparently he's 100% helium. How he is a robot too and has a CPU, I do not understand.
How did he grew?
Dude, don't ask me. Ask Steve Orlando for making this nonsensical bullshit. He's both claiming it's 100% helium and that he has a CPU that's programmable, because later in the episode or in the issue, he talks about how all of their empathy had been removed. And during that stupid white page that
upgrade, yes.
Yeah, on its absolute surface, it's self-contradicting.
I will admit, I was very confused in key moments of this. There were moments where it was supposed to be like a booyah from Bobby, and I was like, I don't even get what he's booyahing about. There are moments of action in here, and I said, that is completely inconceivable at this moment, and I don't understand why this even happened.
Yeah.
100%. Well, that was my reading experience.
Okay, the helium guy is unfreezable, but all the rest of them are very quickly frozen by Bobby the minute he walks into any room. He just freezes all the rest of them. Why did they send the ones that could be frozen if they knew? What was the point of this?
So we got this big character, Helium. He is the big bad guy. He is the one that's holding Bobby Drake's mom the entire time. And he's the one that's got the one-liners and the zingers and all this stuff about how he's going to kill everybody. And everyone is afraid because of this guy. Bobby eventually decides to mess with Helium. Now, if Helium is a robot, he should just freeze him. Even if he's able to heat up his internal components, he actually shouldn't be able to outdo that on comparison to an Omega level mutant. Whatever. Let's say that he is a robot that's made out of 100% helium. What happens, I guess, is Bobby decides, because I can't freeze him and I can't punch him with snow and my ice golems can't do anything to him, I'm going to freeze myself into a skyscraper, into the ionosphere. Because he's helium, I'm going to return to where it came from, even though he's a robot. And apparently Bobby, as an icicle, can go up as far north as possible, carrying helium with him, I think.
I think the logic here is that helium as an element can't be frozen. It floats around freely.
But you said he's a robot.
I know. Again, this comic contradicts itself.
How about everybody with the Sapien League were probably all robots, but this guy was actually helium?
No, because he also had his empathy removed. He even said it as much.
Oh, he's programmable helium.
And the whole thing here, the clever thing here, was because he couldn't do anything, he'd basically stick him into a vacuum where he couldn't hold himself together anymore.
While the other dude, his boyfriend, is keeping him together.
Yeah, somehow.
With empathy, Doc, with pure empathy, he loves him so much, he's able to keep his water molecules from separating.
Well, I don't think he understands anything about basic physics here. Like, I'm not a genius. I'm really not.
I agree.
Unless Iceman is just like some amorphous concept of cold now, where it can just start dissipating. Ice is a solid form of water. if ice breaks, it just falls apart into little bits of ice. It can't skip right to the gaseous stage. If he stops being Iceman inside of it, wouldn't he just turn into an ice statue?
Or puddle.
Well, I mean, he'd turn into an ice statue that would eventually melt. I think the logic here is that Romeo is keeping Iceman's sense of self together instead of it dissipating into the void of.
But it's not really Iceman's sense of self. It's the boyfriend's sense of Iceman's self.
Yes, it's the boyfriend's sense.
It's his projection of what
Iceman's
Iceman is, not what he really is.
Bobby is a sense of self created by Romeo, operating and piloting a ice golem. And if his sense of self dissipates, the body would still be there, but it would just be like turned into a statue. But apparently that's not what happens. It immediately turns gaseous, and
he flies back to the Antarctica just so he can hug Romeo.
But as just like a cold breeze.
Yes. It's a good thing the wind was blowing north.
I thought it was Antarctica.
Whatever, man. It doesn't matter.
We're
all moving towards this big moment because obviously he beats Helium by throwing him into the ionosphere or whatever. And he shows up and he sees his mom after he's obviously told Romeo that he loves him still and really appreciates that he's keeping him alive, even though it's not really him. And then they have a heart to heart, even though this isn't really Bobby Drake. And she's like, yeah, I should have been there for you, even after your father died. And I'm very proud of you. And they make up. Yeah, because it felt like Bobby turned his back on his mom. I don't know, man. Isn't that what happened during Cena Grace's run? He gave up his entire family
because it was Cena Grace, and he understood everything about the X-Men based on movies too. I stopped giving a shit about Iceman a while ago because of how convoluted and terrible they've tried to do storytelling. Honestly, I forgot that his dad died.
I did too.
Completely forgot.
This comic book reminded me.
Yeah. Because I considered anything that happened in Cena Grace's comic, it doesn't really fucking count anyway. I don't think anything in this comic counts either. I have no idea why he needed to make up with his mother, because I dipped out on that shit when it became clear that it was about that weird drag queen. The Cena
so that's the comic book, Doc. You obviously are the X-Men aficionado. I am not. I'm not going to go as far as Zach and recommend this one, but it's not as bad as the first issue. Are you going to go over there? Are you going to go Team Comics Matter with your boy Zach and recommend Astonishing Iceman #2 from Steve Orlando?
I'm going to recommend that it get thrown into the fucking ionosphere or troposphere or wherever.
I recommend Zach read it again and make sure that he really wants to recommend this one.
Yeah. And please, sir, I love you. Do it sober. Because are you sure you read this comic? You sure you didn't read that like X-Men Icons Iceman comic from like the early 2002? That wasn't a bad comic. There was another miniseries that they did as an Iceman miniseries back in the day that I don't remember the name of right now. Maybe you read that comic, because if you read this comic and you thought it was good, I think you need a cranial recalibration, sir.
Believe it or not, Astonishing Iceman #2 was actually a step up from Astonishing Iceman #1. You don't believe me? Fine. I've got evidence. We actually reviewed the very first issue, and this was spectacularly bad. This was everything bad about Marvel Comics in 2023 in a nutshell. You don't see it here. There's also a link in the video description.